Today's lesson is 9-4, day 2. Our objectives are to be able to find the vertex of a graph given the vertex form of the equation, to graph a quadratic equation given vertex form, to match a quadratic equation to a graph, which we'll do in class, and also to analyze a nonlinear graph that models a contextual situation, again, which we'll do in class. This is the vertex form of a quadratic equation. So go ahead and write down what's in blue here. You're going to write vertex form f of x equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. It says when the quadratic equation is written in this form, the vertex is hk. So again, you need to also write vertex is hk here. The a part right here is a vertical stretch, and then the h is the horizontal translation, and k is the vertical translation. Again, this form is very, very useful because we can directly pick out the vertex. It also makes it easier to graph because we don't have to mess with making a table. But again, it's the same thing as ax squared plus bx plus c. It still makes the u shape just a different way of looking at it. All right, so here's number 1. Go ahead and write it down. F of x equals parentheses x minus 3 squared plus 2. Our directions this time just say find the vertex of this quadratic function. I know I have a graph over here, but we're not graphing just yet. All I want you to be able to do in these first couple ones is to pick out the vertex given the quadratic function. So here, again, this is pretty easy. We're going to look at the h and we're going to look at the k, and it's x minus h. So here's where it gets a little bit tricky in the fact that my h is just 3. It's not negative 3 like we're used to saying because of the fact that the form is actually x minus. So x minus h, h is just 3, h is not negative 3. So my vertex here is going to be hk. My h is here, my k is on the end. So my vertex is 3, 2. Again, the vertex is the highest and lowest point. So all you have to write for this one is f of x equals parentheses x minus 3 squared plus 2, and then vertex is 3, 2. And then underneath that, label it as hk. I'm going to show you the graph so that you're prepared to graph whenever we do actually start graphing, but you do not have to graph this one. This is what this graph will look like. Notice that 3, 2 is this point right here, and it is our vertex. This time it's a minimum. There's a 1 in front of the parentheses if nothing's there, so our a here is 1 because there's nothing there. It's what's called a standard graph. So when we go to graph, we're going to plot our vertex point. Then we're going to move 1 space to the right of our vertex. And then since we move 1 space, we're going to square 1 and get 1, so we're going to go up 1. From the vertex, if we go over 2 spaces to the right, then we square 2. And when we square 2, we get 4, so we go up 4. And then we do the same thing on the left. We go left 1 and up 1, left 2 and up 4. And that gives us our nice U shape without actually having to make a table. Please make sure that you have this quadratic function and the vertex right here written before you move on. You do not have to have the graph. All right, so here's number 2. Go ahead and write it down. F of x equals parentheses x plus 1 squared minus 4. So again, right now all I want you doing is picking out the vertex. So we're going to look right here, and if I look, I have minus h in my form, but here I have plus 1. So if I rewrite this with a minus, it's minus a negative 1 instead of plus 1, because we know that 2 negatives here make a positive, and then instead of minus 4, I've written it as plus 4. So now I can pick out my hk. My h is negative 1 and my k is negative 4. And again, I just kind of like to think of it as my h, the sign is going to be opposite of what I think it's going to be. It looks like it's a positive 1, so it's going to be a negative 1. The k is exactly how it looks. It's minus 4, so it's a negative 4. So again, that's all you have to have written for this one, is this part, and then your vertex, and then again label it as hk. You do not have to do the graph, but I'm going to show it. Again, we're going to plot the vertex whenever we do go to graph, and your vertex is right here at negative 1, negative 4. I have a 1 in front of the parentheses if nothing's there, so that means I have what's called a standard graph is if A is 1. So I go to the right of my vertex 1 space and I square 1 and get 1. If I go to the right 2 spaces, then I square 2 and I get 4. And there's where I know my other point is, and I do the same thing to the left. And it says, can you name the zeros, axis of symmetry, and domain and range? My zeros are where it crosses the x-axis, so that's at -1, -2, -3. And then a +1. Axis of symmetry is going to be this line right here that cuts it in half, so that's going to be x equals -1. Domain is always all real numbers, and range is going to be everything from this bottom -4 and up, so it's going to be y greater than or equal to -4. Again, for this one, all you have to have is this part right here. You do not have to have the graph. All right, number 3, again, all I want you doing is picking out the h and the k. This one is written exactly what it looks. We have x minus h, so h is going to be 2, and then plus k, so k is 1. So our vertex right here is 2, 1. That's our hk. So again, for this question, all you have to have written is this part, and then the vertex. So again, I'm going to show you what this is going to look like. This is what the graph of this is going to look like. Again, I'm going to plot my vertex at 2, 1. There's actually a -1 since there's a negative right here. Since there's a negative, that's going to tell me that my U shape is going to open downward. So if I go to the right 1 space from the vertex, then it's going to be 1 squared, which is 1, but then I'm going to have to multiply it times that negative in front, and that's going to make it a -1, so I'm going to go down 1 instead of going up 1. I'm going to move 2 spaces to the right, so I'm going to square 2 and get 4, but then the negative in front, I'm going to say -1 times 4, and that's going to make it -4, so I'm going to go down 4 instead of going up 4. So please make sure you have this part right here written before you move on. Again, it says, can you name the zeros, axis of symmetry, domain, and range? The zeros are right here at 1 and 3. Axis of symmetry is the line that cuts it in half, right here at x equals 2. Domain, again, is always all real numbers. And the range is everything from this 1 and down, so it's y is less than or equal to 1. All right, number 4, again, all we're doing here is naming the vertex. Go ahead and take a minute and pause the video and see if you can come up with the vertex, the HK part of this one on your own. All right, hopefully you've had a minute. Again, if I rewrite this so that it looks like the form, it's -5, so my h is 5, and then instead of -6, I'm going to say plus, since that's the way it is here, so plus -6. So my vertex is going to be 5 and -6. Over here is how this looks. My vertex is over here at 5 and -6. This time I have a 2 in front of the parentheses, so that's going to change my graph a little bit. We're going to say we have a stretch of times 2. So again, you're not actually graphing this one, but I want you to look at it with me because we're getting ready to graph so that you know what you're going to be doing. If I move to the left 1 space or to the right 1 space, either one, if I go 1 space from the vertex, then I say 1 and I square 1 and I get 1, but then I have to multiply it times my stretch, or that number in front of my parentheses. So 1 times 2 is 2. So instead of going to the left 1 and up 1, I'm going to go to the left 1 and then I'm going to go up 2. Then if I go 2 spaces from the vertex, I'm going to square 2 and get 4. And then I have to multiply that 4 by my stretch, which is the number in front of the parentheses, and I get 8. So instead of going up 4, I'm going to actually go up 8 this time to get my next point. So yeah, please make sure that you have this part right here written before you move on. Alright, so there's my first objective, to be able to find the vertex of a graph given the vertex form of the equation. Now we're actually going to use that vertex to actually graph. So here's number 5. Go ahead and note it down. F of x equals parentheses x minus 1 squared. Alright, the first thing we need to do before we start graphing is to actually find that vertex. And again, my vertex form is f of x equals ax minus h squared plus k. And my vertex of that is hk. So let's look, we've got x minus 1, so our h is 1. And now we don't have a plus k here on the end, so we can always put plus 0. So our k here is 0. So we're going to start out by plotting that point 1, 0. So on the x, I'm going to go to the right one since it's a positive one. I'm not going to go up or down at all. So there's my vertex point. Now we need to determine what number's in front of the parentheses to make sure we don't have a stretch. Here there's no number there, so it's going to be a 1, so that's going to be a standard graph, which tells me that from this point, my vertex point, if I go one space to the right, then I'm going to say 1 squared, and 1 squared is 1, so I'm going to go up 1. Then from the vertex point, if I go left 1, again I'm going to square 1, and I'm going to get 1 because 1 squared is 1, so I'm going to go up 1. Then from the vertex, if I go over 2 spaces, then I'm going to square 2 and get 4, so I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Same thing here. If I go left from the vertex 2 spaces, I'm going to go up another 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's my U shape. I'm going to go ahead and draw it. Make sure you have your arrows. Okay. So now I've just graphed given vertex form. Again, vertex form is a whole lot easier to graph because it's easy to find the vertex and you don't actually have to have a table in order to graph. Take a minute, make sure you have this part written down and that you have your graph before you move on. All right, go ahead and write down number 6. It's f of x equals parentheses x minus 3. Oops, that should be squared. Then minus 2. So again, the first thing we're going to do in order to graph this is to actually find our vertex, which is again our hk. So if we look at our vertex form, it's x minus h, so x minus 3. So my h is going to be 3. And then it's plus k. Since this is minus 2, I'm going to say plus negative to see that my k is negative 2. So my vertex is 3, negative 2. So when I go to graph, first thing I'm going to do is plot that vertex point. So since it's 3, negative 2, that means I'm going to go to the right 3 on the x, and negative 2 means go down 2 on the y. So right there's my vertex point. Then we need to look at the number in front of the parentheses. There's nothing there, so it's a 1. So it has a standard graph or standard stretch, which again means if I go to the right 1 space from the vertex, then I'm going to square 1. And 1 squared is 1, so I'm going to go up 1. Same thing here, if I go left 1 and up 1, I get my next 2 points. Then if I go over 2, then to figure out how much I go up, I square 2, and 2 squared is 4, so I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do the same thing on the left-hand side of that vertex. 1, 2. I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there are my points for my U shape. I'm going to go ahead and draw my parabola. All right, so go ahead and make sure you have this down and your graph before you move on. Okay, go ahead and write down number 7. It's f of x equals negative 2, parentheses x plus 1 squared plus 4. Again, just like before, we're going to pick out our vertex. which is our HK. I'm going to go through and get this in the correct form where it looks like this up here first. Our -2 will stay, but it's supposed to be x minus h, and this is x plus 1, so we're going to say x minus -1 squared, and then it's plus k, so we're good with our plus 4. So this way it's easy for us to see that our h is -1 and our k is 4. So there's our vertex. So we're going to go over here to our graph and we're going to plot that vertex of -1, 4. That means go to the left 1 and up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now we've got to look at that stretch, and this time it's not a 1. Our a is actually a -2. So we have a stretch of -2. So from here, that -2 tells me that my U shape should be going down whenever I get finished instead of going up. So I'm going to go from the vertex, I'm going to go one space to the right. And to figure out how much to go down, I'm going to say my stretch, which is -2. Times the fact that I'm going to go over 1, so I'm going to say 1 squared. I'm going over one space, so 1 squared is 1, times my stretch is -2. So I'm going to go down 2, since it's -2, -1, -2, and there's my point. I'm going to do the same thing to the left, over 1 and down 2. Now if I go over 1, 2 spaces from my vertex, then I'm going to say -2 times 2 squared, because I went over 2 spaces, so 2 squared is 4. But I multiply that 4 times my stretch of -2. So 4 times -2 is -8, which tells me when I go 2 spaces from my vertex, I'm going to go down 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Same thing on the other side. If I go over 1, 2 spaces, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And there's my U shape. Hopefully your U shape looks a little bit better than mine. Make sure that you have arrows pointing down. Please make sure that you have all of this and your graph before you move on. Alright, go ahead and copy down number 8. We have f of x equals negative, parentheses, x plus 4 squared minus 1. Again, just like what we've been doing, first of all, we're going to find our vertex, which is going to be our HK. Now this doesn't necessarily look right because we need a minus here and a plus there, so we're going to rewrite this. Instead of plus 4, we're going to say minus a -4 squared, and then instead of minus 1, we're going to say plus a -1. So we're going to have -4 and -1 as our H and our K. So we're going to plot that point first. -1, -2, -3, -4, and then we're going to go down 1 to -1. We're going to look at the number in front of the x squared, or in front of the parentheses, and we're going to have a -1. So we have an A of -1, which tells us our U shape should be going down. So if we go to the right one from the vertex, then to figure out where we go from there, we're going to say -1 times 1 squared. So we went one space over, and then we have to multiply it by our stretch. 1 squared is 1 times -1 is -1. So instead of going up 1, I'm going to go down 1. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then if I go 2 spaces from the vertex, I'm going to say -1, or -1 times 2 squared, since it's 2 spaces from the vertex, and my stretch is -1. So 2 squared is 4 times -1 is -4. So instead of going up 4, I'm going to go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do the same thing on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's my U shape. Go ahead and draw that. Make sure you have your arrows. So please make sure you have all of this and your graph before you move on. That is your last example on your video, so this is the end of your video. Thank you for watching.